big day we've been waiting for since. I got to tell you how this started. Debbie and I were at this little meeting, and the director of the Crawford County Historical Society was sitting next to us. He said, "Oh my, they just called me from down there. There's a guy. He wants to know about the camp." And he said, "I have nothing." I said, "Oh, we would like to talk to him." So we called and we talked to Dr. Martsolf, and it all started. He got a hold of the mixers, who you're going to meet here in a minute, the original owners of the camp. So we are good. So Dr. Robert Martsolf is going to be telling us all about his adventure as a 6-year-old. He started at the camp, and he actually spent 4 summers there. So take it away, Mr. Ross.
What? Actually, I'd like Bruce talk first.
Yeah, let me.
This working?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you just give a little background to, first of all, we didn't know the camp. My father would not sign it over to us. No, so we were there. I was there for at least 20 years.
They bought the camp.
Bought this camp in 1936.
He was born in there.
And that was my first year of life. And after that, college began to get into the way, and after 20 years, we didn't go back much. But I wanted to say that our camp was a little different than what you find today. Most of the camps today are sports oriented. There's the football camps, there's the basketball camps, soccer is the big one. I've got a 3-year-old great-granddaughter, 3-year-old, who's out in the soccer field at camp. She has no idea what she's doing. Well, I'm getting directions. I thought I had a teleprompter, and I do. But ours we would call a recreational camp, with our objective of giving a variety of activities to our campers, maybe to develop some interest, but at least broaden their horizon so they would be at least familiar with a lot of the various activities in which they were participating. And we are going to take a look at some of the activities that we will have available, and I think Rob Martsolf will talk about some of those things. But I also wanted to briefly talk about some of the people who made our camp possible. One was Harold Weed, who must have some descendants around here. And he was the one that first provided hay rides to the kids. He had a beautiful team of Belgians. And secondly, he was the first employer I ever had. I would help him haying in the summertime. At about the age of 10 or 11, my job was to drive the team. And it was kind of amusing because I really never rode a team before, but he from the back of the wagon would direct that team as to what to do. And besides that, I got 50 cents an hour. So that was a big deal. The Waltons helped us. As you'll see later on, the boys' camp had a number of platforms platforms on which the tents were erected. And Mongols built those platforms, so they fit together nicely. They divided them in two, and then every year, of course, in the fall, we take them out and store them with the tents, and in late June, they would be back out on the boys' tent side. And it's one of those things that we always had a problem with the slope on which the camp was located. You know, there is a continuous slope for what I call the Old Valley Road down by the lake up to Screever Edge. I suppose there's maybe 500 feet of elevation difference. There isn't a flat spot on the whole slope. So you'll see, as in this picture, one side of the cabin are level with the ground, the other side is not. And you will see, maybe, well, you can't probably see it in the picture, but those cabins were all put on locust posts. There were no foundations. The main lodge, which was huge, if you can see
It's in the center.
in the center,
It's in the
was
center,
also
kind of covered up here with the
on
tree.
locust posts. And they held up very well for the duration until the very end, when some of the cabins had to have cinder block foundations for the posts. I think maybe I will stop there and let Rob Martsolf talk a little about his experiences with the boys' camp. Now, what you see on the screen is from 1927.
It says 9.
Okay. Wrong for another 2 years. But anyway, why don't you go ahead and talk to them about some of the things that you
Rob,
wanted to.
do you need light
Light?
to see your numbers? Yeah, okay.
Oh, I can look through something.
Rick, you have to go.
Hi, yeah, my name is Rob Martsolf. I'm talking from the point of view of a camper who was at Camp Ah-tod-a-nac for 4 summers, from when I was 6 years old to 9 years old. This would have been from 1956 to 1959. So this is about probably about the middle of the tenure of the camp. You know, Camp Ah-tod-a-nac was opened in 1936, as Bruce said, and it closed in the 60s sometime, I believe.
Well, the private camp closed basically in the 60s.
Yeah. So when I was there in the 50s, and I'd say that was probably the heyday of the camp, I would think. You know, there was a very active camp when I was there. Something I'm going to talk about a little bit of, run over into what Bruce has said, but we'll go and do that anyway. To hear it twice isn't so bad. So I was a camper there from 1956 to 1959. And in general, I'd say my experience there was terrific. I have nothing but good memories of the camp there. And I'm going to share some of those memories with you as best I can. And also, when I did the research for this talk, and I got some of the materials that the Historical Society had and Bruce had, and got to review some of that material, I kind of got a feeling for why this place is so special. Bruce and guys has mentioned that too. That this is a different type of camp. Camps nowadays are, as he mentioned, they're sports camps. There were water sports camps. There were football camps. But this was I'm going to just point out in a little bit here. It was a very well-rounded camp that presented a lot of activities and had a very interesting philosophy and staffing. So what I want to do first, I just want to set this into a little bit of context, and I think probably, I don't know, a fair number of you may understand this point in time, but 1950 to 56 was only 10 to 15 years after the end of World War II. Many of the fathers of my friends and also many of the campers that I was with there, fathers served in World War II, and including my father here, my dad, when he went off to service during World War II. So I was in the camp during this time period. Also at that time, the Cold War was just cranking up, and the baby boom was right at its peak. That started in the mid-40s and went to the mid-60s. So the baby boom is in its peak. So this was a interesting time in our history, and like I said, I think this is probably a pretty active time for Camp Ah-tod-a-nac. I think during the 50s and early 60s is probably a pretty active time for Camp Ah-tod-a-nac also. My father then went off to the service in 1946 to 48. He was served in Europe and in Germany with the Allied Expeditionary Forces, or the occupational forces in Germany at that time, for 2 years. And I think our family is a reflection of that time period. This is myself and my sister and my two brothers. My two older brothers, one was born in 1944, and then 15 months later, my second brother was born in 1945, and my dad went off to the service for 2 years, and my sister and I then were born 15 months apart in 1949, 1950. So it's like these two different families that came out of that time period.
And that sister's sitting right over here.
Yes. My sister is over here. She came down special just to see Lake Canadohta again and find out about Ah-tod-a-nac. So, as you said, some of the things were going on, of course, the Cold War, we were in the shadows of World War II. One of the things, too, that was kind of interesting is in the local news at that time, one of the items that got a lot of attention nationally was a murder trial that was going on with Dr. Sam Shepard. He was a physician in Cleveland who was accused of murdering his wife in the summer of 1954. And one reason that's relevant to the talk here today is that his son Chip was brought to Camp Ah-tod-a-nac that summer with two of his cousins to be at the camp. I would assume that these were pretty traumatized kids that came to the camp that summer, and they were there.
Can I add to that?
Yes, please.
It was 1955,
55.
and the cousins were already there. And it was just the 1st of July, camp was just beginning, and that murder took place on the 4th of July, and on the 5th of July, they brought Chip to be with his cousins at Tonka. We had to hide the newspapers and not tell anybody on the staff. The staff knew, but we didn't dare let the campers know anything about that.
So this is Chip. I'm not sure which one Chip is in the picture. Do you know which one?
Yes, he's on the right. Mickey
Yes.
Mickey Klein's on the left.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
Mickey Klein.
Yeah. So that's kind of a tie-in for that time period.
Did you go all summer? Yeah,
The-
6 weeks.
The course of the term there was 6
At
weeks.
6 years old, you left your parents for 6
Well, that's an interesting point. My family, our kids, the kids in our family stayed for 2 week sessions. You didn't have to go for the whole 6 weeks.
2, 4, or 4 or
2, 4, 6. Yeah. So in my family, we went for 2 week terms to camp. Yeah, I started there at 6 years old. Which is, again, this is a special place.
Yeah.
So let me take the next slide. Oh, yeah. So my two older brothers, all four of us kids, there were 4 of us kids, and we all went to camp for about four sessions. Now, we weren't all there at the same time. I took, it was like 2 separate families, and there was a 4-year gap between my sister and myself and my 2 little brothers. So there was only 1 year in 1956 where all 4 of us kids were at camp the same summer. And if you can see this, yeah, that's in the middle, the tall, stern-looking guy is my oldest brother, Tim. The guy with the big grin on his face is my second brother, Rick, and I'm the cute little guy sitting down there. This is from 1956.
And this is Camp Oakley.
This is Camp Oakley, yeah.
The boys'
Yeah.
camp was known as Camp Oakley.
When did it switch from girls to boys?
Yeah, when did Oakley start?
Oh, when did they add boys? I'd
Possibly
say
the early 50s.
Yeah.
I'd say about 50.
This is, these are some of the girls group here. And you can see in this picture,
Oh, that's
the
neat.
cute little girl with the bangs in the middle is my sister sitting over there. And in the back, you can understand, a mixer. And this also is from 1956.
You weren't Carol Mixer yet though, were you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you were, okay.
So the,
Just there.
Yes.
Not
Yeah, this
56.
is a newlywed.
Not 56. We were married in 57.
That's right. we were there.
All right.
She forgot already.
She was not Mrs. Mixer here.
so as Bruce mentioned, this was a summer camp for girls preceding Camp Ah-tod-a-nac. It used to be Camp Canadohta, for obvious reasons. And it was a summer camp for girls, mostly, interestingly enough, Jewish girls from Cleveland and Pittsburgh was the primary source of the camp there. And Camp Ah-tod-a-nac initially was also just a girls' camp. But then, as they mentioned, sometime soon thereafter, they also added the part for boys, which is called Camp Oakley, which is where I was.
And that's where we got a lot of little brothers
Yeah.
of the girls that were there.
Yeah, a lot of the brothers of the girls. So they added the camp for boys at some point. That's where I knew the camp mostly.
Question?
Yeah.
Was
Sure.
it not a co-ed?
Hmm?
Was it never co-ed?
No.
We only ate together.
Oh.
Yeah.
Ate in the dining hall.
Well, there were some activities like swimming in the afternoon. That would be co-educational.
Yeah.
And
The horses.
riding, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the boys took their lessons to get together and the girls took their lessons.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. So this.
Are you asking if there were boys and girls there at the same time?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the activities. Did they do the activities together?
There.
Not many.
No,
Not
not
Well, the girls got to stay in the cabins. You saw the cabins, and the cabins were initially built again by the Camp Canadohta group, and then they took the cabins over. And the girls stayed in the cabins, and the guys stayed in tents down the hill. So they were separate in that way. A lot of activities were separate.
Did you have like campfires and they would
Yeah.
all be together?
Yeah. A little bit later, we're talking. Every evening there was an evening program that both the boys and the girls participated in. Yeah. So,
By 1964, the boys were in the cabins.
yeah.
You're looking at it on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
They were in
No, in 50,
4,
no,
6,
I-
and 8. The girls were in 1,
Right.
3, 5,
Yeah, I
and
spent
7.
one
Because
summer
my brother
in
was
the
there
cabins. So
I was
59, the boys
Yeah.
moved up to the cabins also.
He would have started there at 64, probably.
Yeah. So,
I have a question.
more questions? Yeah.
So, like, I'm very familiar with Canadohta, and I've always heard about these, the camps. And my dad's always tried to say, oh, they're up on this hill, they're up on that hill. Do you actually have an aerial map or a good description of where they are, or where they were, and what's there now? And if that's part of it.
No.
I can tell you where they are.
Very easy.
Actually, there's a big new log cabin, and I believe, some of the boys, they had 10 platforms down there. And then if you go dog, you don't wanna go down that camp at the roads anymore, cause all this bad weather we've had, you can't even drive a tractor down there. But where the new, houses, that's the cabins, then when you go, it's where the basketball or tennis courts were, but it's basketball now. And then you go down to the end of the lake, and there's a blue shed, and
Right
that's
next to
where
the
the
fish
swimming was, where the blue shed is.
Right next to the fish commission.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
So
where you're
if I'm
looking right
at
here.
the boat launch, it's
Yeah.
off to the left,
Correct.
that's where that blue shed is.
That'll work on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the
Yeah,
left of the
there's
fish
a map
commission,
that
that's where the
says
stocks are.
Lake Canadohta and Ah-tod-a-nac and Oakleaf are on this map. This map, you can get this, I forget where you get this.
Yes.
Why was it called Camp Oakleaf?
Excuse me.
Well, that's kind of, well, first of all, you can realize that Ah-tod-a-nac is Canadohta spelled, almost spelled backwards.
Yeah.
You know, they've got that. And Oakleaf, I thought, well, certainly there's oak trees and stuff, and they just named it after something natural thing, but as it turns out, from what I read this little thing that the guy that advanced the first loan to buy the property to Bruce's dad, his last name was Oakleaf. So,
Oh,
is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So,
John and Catherine Oakleaf had a cabin right on the valley, what was the Valley Road. Here where, well, the Johnsons lived on the same property as them. And he was a banker in Titusville. And so he was willing and able to provide some funding for my dad to buy in 1936. Interestingly, we don't know when the cabins that we saw, and we can go back to number 33 if we can.
I can bounce around, but that's on a different program. Here's some cabins
That's
here.
okay.
Yeah, that'll do.
Okay.
And when the Jewish girls camp, we don't know when that was built. But as the pictures from their brochure, it says 1929, did you say?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think that they were in existence much longer than that. I think the Depression maybe put them out of business. But as I began to think about when that was built, how that was built, where would the lumber come from to build all those cabins, a lodge that was at least 70 feet long by 50 feet wide? How would you get the lumber there on the side hill? There was a railroad spur that was run along the Valley Road. And I don't know whether the track bed is still recognizable or not. But my thought was that they brought all that in by rail and hired local teamsters to break it up the hill. I did take a look at 1925 Ford trucks. Maybe they had Ford trucks bring them up. Those 1925 Ford trucks would not have been up to the job.
Belgian horses.
yeah.
The horses.
Yeah. And she has some other things to tell.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah.
Go ahead,
It's
back.
working.
He has to go back.
So, as Bruce again said, my part of it, where I say the boys part of it was actually called Camp Oakleaf, which is all part of Camp Ah-tod-a-nac, but our section was called Camp Oakleaf. They also had a wilderness camp they went to.
Well, I'm gonna show that later on.
Okay. So, and that was at the Allegheny Forest,
Well, no, it was private land.
private. You go this way. So, well, this goes back to the Camp Canadohta, the origin of the buildings and stuff. So we can move on beyond that too. And again, we've talked about the buildings that were built on the main campus up above. There was the large lodge, and then there were 8 cabins, right?
Yeah,
Four
4 on each side.
on each side.
You'll note how high the bottom side of that lodge is. That was due to the slope that was there, supported by locust posts.
Now, that first cabin on the left, the one next to the lodge, that was for the kitchen girls and the cooks. We stayed in the kitchen girls and the cooks, and we had 2 great cooks, Irene Kosef and Laura Bunting, if any of you knew them. They both cooked in the wintertime at the Cambridge Springs at the big hotel. But they came every morning, and they could make a wonderful meal out of the leftovers, you know. They were wonderful cooks. Then on the left-hand side, the first cabin was for the Mr. and Mrs. Mixer, for the directors. And of course, Bruce and his brothers lived in that, grew up in that first cabin. Then the next one down was for the nurse and her husband. While I was involved with the camp, we were lucky enough to have a nurse and her husband, and they brought their son to Camp Oakleaf. Nursey took temperatures every morning. You got weighed, I think, once a week at least. And she did cabin inspection. When you went back to the cabin after breakfast, you had to make your bed, clean the cabin, because when you went to your first activity, Nursey went through all the cabins and inspected, and you were graded on that.
So we didn't hand out any demerits.
I don't remember any of that, so I must have been paying attention.
Well, I don't know that
No,
they did that.
no, we let those tents just go wherever.
Go
You know,
wherever, yeah.
the wind would take out the dust.
Yeah, that's right. So I was at Camp Oakleaf. This is what the value
They were from
provides.
Oakleaf, yeah.
There's members there, there's campers there, and those little chevrons in the middle, you got one for each year. So I have one at home that has 4 of those on there. So for my 4 years at Camp Oakleaf. So as I mentioned, the girls got to sleep in the cabins, but the guys were down in the tents. These tents were not like they are today. These were old World War II Army surplus tents, and these were heavy olive drab pole tents that are left over from World War II. Next one. And this doesn't protect real well, but the tent that I started out in there is that the youngest boys stayed in a large pole tent, had a center pole, and it slept about 8 campers. So the youngest boy slept in the larger tent with 8 campers. The building beside it was like this clapboard shack that served as our quote latrine. Inside there was an open shower and just a toilet sitting out in the middle.
Couple.
Couple toilets sitting out in the middle of the room. It was sort of like a large outhouse with plumbing. And that's what the building is. And you can see that building then on the right-hand side is our latrine. But the older boys, and then
We call it a bathhouse.
yeah, bathhouse. Yes, that's a nicer term.
Yeah.
And the older boys, and including myself, for a couple of the summers I was there, slept again in these Army surplus tents. So these were wall tents, and they each slept 2 guys. The cots were these old Army surplus cots, and you can see underneath them there are those large steamer trunks. Those seemed to be popular back then for the campers to bring their stuff to camp and belongings to camp. And some of my family folklore that my sister reminded me of was that my first year at camp, I brought back at the end of 2 weeks of camp my steamer trunk that still had my same clothes, nicely folded and clean and unused, in my trunk that my mom had packed 2 weeks before. So, which doesn't surprise. I was a 6-year-old kid. You know, so, yeah. So so I was talking about that. Then, so as Bruce said, the camp here was not like a lot of the camps are today that are pretty specialized for different sports or water camps or horse camps. In fact, Camp Ah-tod-a-nac was initially said to be a horse camp, which it was. There were horses there to ride, and again, what they tried to do is offer a wide variety of activities for the kids to try different things. They call it a complete modern camp. For the American youth, I'm not sure it made it modern. Maybe that's just the plumbing in the bathroom. But it wasn't complete. There's a wide variety of things to do. Number one is a horse camp that was there. They had who's the next? They had a riding ring there, and all the kids had an opportunity to ride horses, which I did. My sister also. And you can kind of even now you can still remember the names and characteristics of some of the horses. You know, the smallest, gentlest one was a sort of pony called Babe, and there was a sort of a nondescript larger horse called Penny. There was one horse that was a little bit wild, it was called Patches, and everyone kind of has a memory of these horses. And although I never took up horse riding later on, it was an experience that I would have had otherwise at this horse camp, or what was thought to be a horse camp. Also, it could be called a water sports camp. The Camp Ah-tod-a-nac was right. I recall there was a road that was between Ah-tod-a-nac and the beach, and we just went down this little dirt road to the waterfront. And at the waterfront, they had sports. They had swimming lessons through the Red Cross that they were given. They also had sailboats and canoes that the older kids would get lessons in while they were there. So you can call it a water camp too if you wanted to. The directors of I can remember the directors of the waterfront. The guy's name was George Klein, and he was this huge guy. For a 6-year-old, he certainly appeared to be. I don't know what it was, but he was an ex-Marine from World War II, and his wife Edie were the waterfront directors. And my sister remembers George. He kind of
Terrifying.
terrified.
They were directors of the boys' camp. They were directors of
They were directors of the boys' camp and the waterfront.
yeah.
So,
Let me add just a little bit. I don't need a picture for this.
okay.
But you talk about going down to the lane to the waterfront. When we first started that camp, the property lines were very close to the cabins that we saw just a little while ago. And we had to go through the pasture with 2 green gates to get to the waterfront. And most of the time, the cows were also there. But there was also there a bull.
Were these weed cattle?
Yes, they were Harold Reed's cattle. He had 40 head. And he's left his bull run with a herd. My dad was a little concerned that there might be a problem someday, and, there was a problem. As a smart aleck, I would bellow a little bit going down there, and pretty soon, the bull would be there. Said, who's this strange bull in my herd? So we were able to buy another strip of land towards the farmhouse, which eliminated any danger from the cow. And so after that point, all was well.
So this camp was pretty much a complete experience, a lot of different experiences for the campers, but it was also a very structured environment too. The days were pretty well set, and which is good for kids to have some structure in their life. The day started every day with flag raising every day in the main campus. This included all the kids right before breakfast, and in the evening there would be a flag lowering. Again, kind of giving some structure to the day. There were 3 meals a day were given there. Were served in the dining hall in the main lodge.
That doesn't look like it when we were there.
No,
That's
that's
the
That's the
early.
earlier
Yeah, it's an
picture.
earlier picture, yeah, it changed a little bit, but that's still the dining hall that we use that. It's a pretty good sized room that was there, and both the boys and the girls ate together at that time.
How many people would go there for a summer? Like, at any
Take up to 50.
Well,
We took up.
I just, the enrollment basically was about 50 girls, maybe 25 boys, would be about the maximum that we ever had.
And they would change every couple, they were all the same kids. They're 50 and 25 at a time, right?
Yeah, boys camp usually had 25 kids, and the girls usually 50 kids. And some of the pictures that you see will show the groups.
Yeah. So this is the front porch of the lodge, and although I remember the food being good, my only clear memory of my eating experience here was one morning for breakfast. I didn't feel very well when I went to breakfast, and we had pancakes and maple syrup. And right after breakfast, I went out in the front porch here and threw up. And I haven't been able to eat maple syrup since. Although the food was good, again, that's my only memory of the eating there. There was a large fireplace there too. Again, I'm going to talk about the evening programs a bit. This is the fireplace at the end of the dining room. Yeah. They also had, again, looking at the structure of the camp, every morning and afternoon there'd be an activity period that the kids would go to different activities, obviously. That included, of course, horseback riding and the swimming, but there were also a number of other activities available. One was a rifle range. There was 22 rifles for target shooting at a rifle range. They had archery, they had some field sports. There was also a craft house there. It was a cinder block craft house sort of right beside the dining hall, in which there was a dark room for developing pictures. They had a kiln there that you could make these little ceramic gifts for your family to take home to your family. And the one gift that I recall and I had for a long time, but I haven't found it recently, was I made, of course, an oak leaf out of ceramics with 2 little acorns on it. But interestingly enough, for the 50s, there was a little different thoughts about smoking, and this oak leaf was in the form of an ashtray. It was to be used as an ashtray, which was kind of interesting to look back on that and how smoking is accepted today. But it was another activity that was available to the kids.
So here's hay rides.
Yeah, and then in the evening, they did have hay rides. I mentioned the hay ride. That's you on the front, isn't it?
Yeah, on the
I'll
tractor.
talk about that a little more later on.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Well, the other thing I wanted just to mention, we had a little dark room in this craft shop for developing film, making prints. And the interesting thing about it, to get into it, was a U with black paint on all sides, so that the campers could go in and out when you were working with minimum light and not let any light into the room. It was kind of unusual that they could come in and see what we were doing and maybe learn a little bit and then walk back out into the main craft.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell about this, like taking them to the wiener roast down in the
Well,
field
yeah,
while it's there.
I have that later on, but
Okay. So another thing that asked about kids doing things together, every evening there was a program in the dining hall where all the campers would get together, the boys and girls would be together, and there were a lot of different activities that did there. One of the things that was pretty popular is they did a lot of skits. Each of the cabins or groups of kids would put a skit together and perform that for the group. They, of course, had snacks and things, and some board games, things like that. Every Thursday was a movie night. They would project a movie on Thursday nights together with all the kids together. Another thing that I recall too was each evening at the end of the evening, all the campers would form a circle around the dining hall, hold hands, and sing the goodnight song, which we might even sing later on if you feel like it. So again, it's just a time. It was a special time. Also during the day there was after lunch there was a rest period actually, about a 1 hour rest period after lunch, and then the campers they could take a nap if you wanted to, or you could read, or you could write letters home. A lot of the campers, their parents would send them with self-addressed envelopes and some stationery, and hope to get a letter back from camp. And in fact, if you look at this table over here, there's a number of letters from my sister that she wrote back from camp. They're not all real informative, but some are pretty.
Interestingly,
Yeah.
the first week, there were lots of letters going on. I'm homesick, I want to come home. By the second week, that disappeared. And one of the nice things about camp was it was a social event. You learned to get along with other people who were sleeping beside you. And I wish I had learned that.
This was a special place. And again, talking about the wide variety of activities that were made available and the interaction between the boys and the girls and people learning to live with each other in close quarters and cabins and tents were important lessons to be learned. But there was a mission statement. Can't really read that, but the mission statement I thought was interesting, especially if you think about how camps are promoted today. Very, very specialized in the sports, and a lot of them are, what can you do for me? How can I, become myself a better person? And it's just a totally different philosophy back then. I just want to read a couple of things from this mission statement I thought were kind of interesting. Another glasses here. This starts out, it says, there's an art and a joy in living, the formation of good habits that will mold strong character. It is through camp life that the art of living, character training, are abundantly found, and the activities are varied and complete, as we've talked about here, and serve as stepping stones to progress. And then another paragraph down, that again kind of remembering the context of this, right after World War II and in the throes of the Cold War. A new era lies ahead for all of us. The give and take that makes nations, the give and take of nations must now prove harmoniously to achieve if we are to survive. The individual must play his part in no less than perfection. As the structure of a building is stronger than the composite bricks, just as a nation is more secure than the people, is no more secure than the people making up the nation. Okay, you don't hear this kind of stuff so much then, but again, in the shadows of World War II and during the Cold War, the importance of character building of individuals to strengthen the nation is kind of an interesting concept. And the values that they tried to instill were better attitudes, stronger character, physically robust bodies, stabilized emotional control, and a good citizen. So, little, again, this is another way of pointing out that this camp was a different place, a special place, I think. Another evidence of that showed that this camp was very much involved in the personal aspects too. That they did get to know the campers in a way that I don't think happens so much today. And I'll give a couple reasons for that. But I have a letter that I found that was written from Bruce's dad, John, who started the camp, to my parents. And this was in response to something that my brothers were involved in. And my oldest brother told me this situation where when he was probably 11 or 12, my second brother was probably 10. They were involved in this little thing that boys particularly get involved in, is they were taking crab apples off of a tree and then putting a thorn through the crab apple and then throwing them at each other. I mean, this is what 10-year-old boys do. And one of the crab apples stuck in my second brother's leg, and my older brother felt it was his duty then to protect my younger brother, my second oldest brother, and a little bit of a melee broke out among the boys. And Mr. Mixer, the camp director, got a hold of this and my brother Tim sent a letter to my parents reporting this incident. And then Mr. Mixer then in turn wrote a letter to my parents. And it starts off and said, I've finished making a quote study of Tim's letter to you, but I believe the situation was as follows. And he goes on to describe the situation that happened there, and also some thoughts that he had about Rick's behavior and my brother Tim's behavior. And this just impressed me as a place where the leadership there at the camp was very much personally involved with the kids that were there. I think some of that might have to do with the type of staff that was there. Again, this is something I found out later, is that probably 90% of the staff at Camp Ah-tod-a-nac and Oakleaf were either college students or college graduates. And this is at a time in 1960 when only about 7% of the population were college graduates. And here almost 90% of the staff at Camp Ah-tod-a-nac were college graduates, many of them in pursuing teaching degrees or degrees in counseling. So I think this might have a lot to do with the interaction of the kids there. And one other thing that I thought was interesting, that this is over, there's one of these on the table, is at the end of every summer, the families of the campers would get a newsletter from the camp that basically had a little note about each day, what happened every day at camp, and also a little comment or vignette about every camper that was there. I, for instance, have been here under Robbie as bell ringer, and the reason I got that moniker was they would ring a bell for mealtime, and one kid would be assigned to ring the bell, and apparently I did that a fair amount of times, so I was the bell ringer. For my sister Margie, she was in cabin 3, which was the mouse house, which no one seems to know why it was called that, but she was in that cabin. They also mentioned that she had special roles in some of the skits at night. One particularly was Gypsy Night, and another one was Nightclub Night. I'm not sure what she did as Nightclub Night. But again, these are very personal interactions with the kids that went to this camp. So it's a so for me as a camper there, it was great.
Happy time.
Happy times.